Chapter 7, Section 4, The Legacy of the War, Part 2. Please make sure to have your Google Doc open through the Google Classroom to answer questions as this video plays. The cost of the war. No one knows exactly how many people died in the war, but 8 years of fighting took a terrible toll. An estimated 25,700 Americans died in the war, and 1,400 remained missing. About 8,200 Americans were wounded. Some were left with permanent disabilities, such as amputated limbs. The British suffered about 10,000 military deaths. Many soldiers who survived the war left the army with no money. They had received little or no pay for their service. Instead of back pay, the government gave some soldiers certificates for land in the West. But many men sold that land to get money for food and other basic immediate needs. Both the Congress and states had borrowed money to finance the conflict. The war left the nation with an estimated $35 million in debt, a debt that would prove difficult to pay off. The losers of the war also suffered. Thousands of loyalists lost their property. Between 60,000 and 100,000 loyalists left the United States during and after the war. Among them were several thousand African Americans and Native Americans, including Joseph Brant. Most of the loyalists went to Canada. There they settled new towns and provinces. They also brought English traditions to areas that the French had settled. Even today, Canada has both French and English as official languages. Issues after the war. The American Revolution is not just a war, but a change in ideas about the government. Before the war, Americans had demanded their rights as English citizens. But after declaring their independence, they replaced that goal with the idea of republicanism. This idea stated that instead of a king, the people would rule. The government would obtain its authority from the citizens and be responsible to them. For this system to work, individuals would have to place the good of the country above their own interest. At first, only land-owning white males were allowed to partake in governing by voting or holding public office. However, women could help the nation by teaching their children the virtues that benefited public life. Such virtues included honesty, duty, and the willingness to make sacrifices. As part of their liberty, Americans called for more religious freedom. Before the war, some laws discriminated against certain religions. Some states had not allowed Jews or Catholics to hold public office. After the war, states began to abolish those laws. They also ended the practice of using tax money to support churches. Many people began to see a conflict between slavery and the ideal of liberty. Vermont outlawed slavery, and Pennsylvania passed a law to free slaves gradually. Individual African Americans also tried to end slavery. For example, Elizabeth Freeman sued for her freedom in a Massachusetts court and won. Her victory in 1781 and other similar cases ended slavery in that state. Freeman later described her desire for freedom. Quote, "Any time while a slave, if 1 minute's freedom had been offered to me, and I had been told I must die at the end of that minute, I would have taken it. Just to stand 1 minute on God's earth, a free woman." Elizabeth Freeman, quoted in Notable Black American Women. With freedom, African Americans began to form their own institutions. For example, the preacher Richard Allen helped start the Free African Society. That society encouraged African Americans to help each other. Allen also founded the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the first African American church in the United States. Perhaps the main issue facing Americans after the war was how to shape their national government. American anger over British taxes, violation of rights, and control of trade had caused the war. Now the United States needed a government that would protect citizens' rights and economic freedom. In the next video, we will see how U.S. leaders worked to create such a government. This is the end of Chapter 7, Section 4. At this point, you should be able to answer a few questions. First, what advantages helped the Americans win the Revolutionary War? Second, how did the end of the war affect loyalists? Third, what were the economic costs of the war to individuals and to the government? Finally, how did republicanism shape the United States after the war? Keeping in mind the American ideas about government, the roles men and women could play in public life, religious freedom, and the anti-slavery movement. Please also make sure that you have finished your Google Doc, and when you have done so, submit it through the Google Classroom. Once you have done that, you are finished with Chapter 7, Section 4, and we'll see you in class tomorrow.